June 18th, 2023. As the sun rises on the North Atlantic, a small submersible slips beneath the surface of the ocean. Inside, 5 people are sealed into a pressure vessel the size of a minivan. No windows that open, no way out. The expedition is simple. Descend for 2 hours, reach the seabed, approach the wreck. As Titan sinks deeper, the light disappears. 1,000 meters, 2,000. The pressure outside is now hundreds of times greater than at the surface. Every system is still reporting normal. The crew continues their descent. Short messages are exchanged with the surface. Course adjustments, routine checks. At 3,000 meters, there is no margin for error, no rescue, no backup. Only trust in the vessel and in the decisions that built it. At 1 hour 45 minutes in, the messages stop. All contact with the sub is lost. June 2023. St. John's, Newfoundland, Canada. The expedition has already been delayed. For days, the North Atlantic has refused to cooperate. High swells, shifting winds, low cloud cover. Conditions too unstable for launch. Each morning, the port begins the same way. Weather briefings downloaded, satellite forecasts reviewed, wave models studied hour by hour. The Titan expedition is meticulous by necessity. Every dive depends on a narrow window, calm seas, stable currents, predictable visibility. On board the support vessel, checklists are revisited. Battery systems are charged and logged. The external frame is inspected. Thrusters are tested. Life support consumables accounted for and sealed. Inside the submersible's pressure hull, equipment is secured for descent. Emergency rations are stowed. Oxygen supply calculated. Carbon dioxide scrubbers installed and verified. Each detail recorded, each signature signed off. This is Dive 88. On board this mission are 5 people. Shahzada Dawood, a businessman and philanthropist, a long-standing admirer of exploration and innovation. With him, his 19-year-old son, Solomon Dawood, a university student fascinated by science fiction and deep-sea discovery. British aviator and entrepreneur Hamish Harding, no stranger to extreme environments, he has traveled to space, to the South Pole, and holds multiple world records. French deep-sea explorer Paul-Henri Nargeolet, simply known as PH, one of the world's leading authorities on the Titanic wreck. He has visited it dozens of times. And piloting the submersible himself, the CEO of OceanGate, Stockton Rush, founder, engineer, the public face of the company. Together, they are preparing to descend nearly 3,800 meters to the seabed. June 16th, 9:31 a.m. The expedition begins. Lines are cast off from the harbor. the Canadian-flagged research vessel MV Polar Prince eases away from port, bound for a patch of ocean nearly 700 kilometers offshore. Another weather review, still marginal. Waves cresting above acceptable launch height. The team waits. Dive operations in this region are dictated by patience. Surface condition depends on visibility. The launch platform must remain stable. Recovery must be predictable. June 17th. Forecast models are beginning to shift. Wind speeds easing, swells projected to drop overnight. By late evening, a new update arrives. June 18th shows promise. A break in the weather, a viable window, not wide, but workable. On deck, activity increases. Ballast systems reviewed once more. Communication protocols rehearsed. Emergency contingencies briefed. Passengers are walked through procedures. Each paying guest is referred to as mission specialist. The term is deliberate, suggesting participation, contribution, a role in something larger than a sightseeing trip. They are told the descent will take approximately 2 hours. Time on the seabed, 3 to 4. Total mission duration, about 8 hours. Final preparations continue into the night. Equipment secured, weight calculations adjusted. Shortly before midnight, confirmation is given. Weather conditions are within limits. Dive 88 is approved. Everything is in place. The sea, at last, is calm. In a few hours, they will leave the support vessel and head toward the wreck. To a ship that sank more than a century ago. A wreck lying in darkness nearly 4 kilometers below the surface. And for decades, no matter the cost, no matter the risk, people have kept going back. For more than 70 years, the Titanic was a ghost. A position marked by distress signals, a debris field estimated on charts, but no proof of its whereabouts. Then, in 1985, an American oceanographer changed that. Robert Ballard led an expedition into the North Atlantic, armed with deep-sea cameras and a new kind of underwater vehicle. What he found lay nearly 3,800 meters below the surface. The bow, intact, upright, silent.
New exclusive photographs, by far the best yet, are in from the Titanic. For most of this century, that huge passenger liner has been a dead ship, resting in an ocean grave that, until these past few days, no one had seen. Now, scientists have even seen the iceberg damage that doomed the Titanic.
The images traveled the world. They were grainy but unmistakable. The unsinkable ship had been found.
And you're going to have this telepresence. I mean, that's what the whole thing is all about, is can we create the illusion of being there to a level of a full experience.
With the discovery came mythology. The Titanic was no longer just a tragedy in history books. It became something else, a time capsule, a memorial, an underwater cathedral. More than 1,500 people had died on its maiden voyage. Their stories of wealth, of migration, of sacrifice were stitched into the wreck itself. The ocean had preserved it, protected it, hidden it. And that distance and depth only intensified the fascination. Very few would ever see it in person, which made the desire to go there stronger. Throughout the late 1980s and 1990s, submersibles returned again and again. Scientists mapped the debris field, recovered artifacts, documented decay. Each dive carried risk. Each descent pushed the limits of engineering. But no expedition captured the public imagination quite like the one led by filmmaker James Cameron.
Everything is 20 times harder underwater, no matter what it is. Lighting is more difficult. Working with actors underwater is very difficult. Safety factors are more difficult. Any working with electricity, obviously, is very difficult. And, just kind of gives you those little added headaches that make it interesting.
Cameron developed a deep personal interest in underwater exploration, working closely with engineers and research teams to document the wreck in detail and understand the challenges of reaching it. Before he ever brought the story to cinemas, Cameron went to the wreck himself dozens of times. He described the descent as alien, total darkness, crushing pressure, a world without light.
Well, we photographed the ship. We did what we planned to do. We went there and we created these, we tried to do, beautifully lit images of the wreck and try to get the haunting, evocative quality of it. But the thing that we didn't expect to do that we wound up doing was we sent our little robot camera down inside the ship and photographed things that people hadn't seen since the ship sank. And to see that, the kind of ghostly remains of that luxury, the chandeliers, the hand-carved wall paneling and the swinging doors that you would have come through as you went into the beautiful reception area, all still there, just kind of down in blackness. That was probably the most exciting and most emotional part of the whole expedition.
In 1997, his film Titanic transformed the disaster into a global phenomenon. The scale, the romance, the spectacle. For a new generation, the Titanic was no longer a distant event in 1912. It was immediate and emotional. The ship became legend, and the wreck became a site of pilgrimage. There is something uniquely powerful about the Titanic. It represents ambition and innovation, and the consequences when that confidence fails. It sits at the intersection of wealth and poverty, class and survival, hope and catastrophe. It was meant to be the safest ship ever built, and yet it sank on its first voyage. More than a century later, that contradiction still grips us. The wreck is deteriorating now, and scientists estimate it will not last forever, which only adds urgency to those determined to see it, to witness history before it disappears. By 2023, deep-sea tourism had begun to promise something extraordinary. Not just footage of the wreck, but a seat beside it. A chance to descend personally, to look out into the dark and see the ship's bow emerge from the black water exactly as Ballard first did. For some, the appeal was scientific, and for others, simply the chance to say they had been there. The Titanic remains more than a wreck. It's a fixed point in history, and people continue to measure themselves against its scale, its story, and its depth. And in 2023, 5 people prepared to answer that pull once again. June 18th, 2023. 5:15 a.m. The MV Polar Prince arrives at the wreck site. Beneath the ship, nearly 3,800 meters down, lies the bow of the Titanic. The sea state is calm. The long-awaited weather window has held. Crew members move quickly. Cables are checked. Communications verified. The launch and recovery system, known as LARS, is positioned on the water's surface. Mounted on top of it, the submersible Titan. Today's dive is designated by OceanGate as Dive 88. 6:15 a.m. The 5 occupants gather for a final briefing. The descent profile reviewed and emergency procedures are restated. If communications drop temporarily, remain calm. If ballast must be released, follow instruction. 8:10 a.m. With sea conditions holding steady, the 5 participants prepare to leave the main deck. Life vests secured. Final words exchanged with crew. A small inflatable boat ferries them from the Polar Prince to the floating launch platform positioned nearby. The Atlantic is calm, long, low swells beneath a gray sky. Ahead of them, mounted on top of the platform, waits the Titan submersible. From a distance, it appears compact, almost experimental. Up close, it is their only route down. 8:25 a.m. They climb aboard the platform, stepping carefully across wet metal grating. Technicians are already in position. Final external inspections are underway. 8:30 a.m. The 5 occupants board the sub. First to climb inside is veteran explorer Paul-Henri Narjolet. Then British businessman Hamish Harding. Father and son Shahzada Dawood and Sulman Dawood. Last in is OceanGate's founder and CEO, the pilot for the mission, Stockton Rush. Inside, there are no seats in the conventional sense. The 5 mission specialists sit cross-legged on the floor of a carbon fiber pressure hull just over 6 meters long. There is a single acrylic viewport at the front. Once sealed, there is no way to open the hatch from inside. Shortly after boarding, the forward titanium dome is secured. 17 bolts fasten it into place. The designation is confirmed, Dive 88. Final system checks follow. Internal displays active. Acoustic communications link established. Tracking beacon transmitting. On deck, crew members clear the area. 8:55 a.m. The floating launch platform is vented. Air escapes with a sharp hiss. Gradually, the structure begins to sink below the surface, taking Titan with it. For a moment, the submersible rides just above the waterline. Then the Atlantic closes over the platform. From the surface, only ripples remain. Inside, lighting remains steady. Instruments show stable readings. 9:18 a.m. Titan disengages from the launch platform. Ballast systems activate. The submersible tilts forward slightly and begins to descend under its own power. Above, on the deck of the Polar Prince, eyes track coordinates on screens. Below, the water shifts from green to dark blue. Sunlight weakens. Depth increasing. All systems normal. The dive is underway. By 2023, visiting the Titanic was no longer limited to government-funded expeditions or elite research institutions. A private company had entered the arena, OceanGate. Founded in 2009 by engineer and entrepreneur Stockton Rush, The company positioned itself at the frontier of a new industry, private deep-sea exploration. Its mission was ambitious: to make the ocean more accessible, not just to scientists, but to civilians. OceanGate did not describe its clients as tourists. They were called mission specialists, participants, explorers, citizen scientists. This was not framed as a sightseeing trip. It was presented as involvement in discovery.
Going in a sub is something I find difficult to describe because it's such an emotional experience, regardless of whether you're going, 100 feet down or 12,000 feet. It's just being inside a sub with, anything you want is with you. There's nothing coming into the sub and you're not leaving it. And the sounds are different. What you see is different. It's just such an emotional experience.
Promotional material promised something extraordinary: the chance to descend nearly 4 kilometers to the seabed, to sit meters away from the bow of the Titanic, to witness a ship that had not seen daylight since 1912. Few experiences on Earth could rival it, and OceanGate leaned into that rarity. A ticket cost approximately $250,000 per person. For that price, participants received more than a dive. They were offered immersion, briefings, training sessions, direct access to engineers and pilots. They would help operate sonar, assist with photography, log observations. This was exploration, they were told, in real time. At the center of it all was Titan. Unlike traditional deep-sea submersibles, typically spherical, constructed entirely from thick titanium, Titan used a different approach. A cylindrical hull made from carbon fiber, titanium end caps at each side. Designed to be lighter and more efficient, capable of being deployed from a relatively small support vessel. OceanGate described it as innovative, a necessary evolution, a way to expand access without the immense cost of traditional deep-sea vehicles.
So all of our test program has been about incremental testing. We started over 2 years ago with Cyclops 1, which allowed us to test our launch and recovery system, the launch platform, and a number of really important operational and electronic processes, motor controls, things like that. Out here, this is really focused on one thing, and that's the pressure vessel, and making sure that component, which is clearly the most critical component of the sub, is safe and capable of handling depths down to 4,000 meters repeatedly with people on board.
For several reasons, the model appeared to work. Dives were completed, images captured, clients returned to the surface with stories few others could tell. Photographs circulated online. The ship looming out of darkness. Smiling participants beside mission patches. The impossible made tangible. OceanGate's message was clear. The deep ocean should not belong only to governments and billion-dollar institutions. It could belong to those willing to invest in the experience. And the Titanic was the ultimate destination. Not just a research site, but one of the most recognizable shipwrecks in the world. It represents a pivotal moment in maritime history. A collision between ambition and reality. To visit the wreck is to see that history directly, in the environment where it still rests. And OceanGate offered access to that experience. Not through documentary footage or archived images, but in person, through a single acrylic viewport nearly 4 kilometers beneath the surface. By June 2023, OceanGate had already completed several expeditions to the wreck. Dive 88 was part of that ongoing season. The company presented the mission as a continuation of its work. Another scheduled descent. Another group of participants. Its message reflected confidence. Deep sea exploration, it argued, was no longer the domain of a select few. 5 people had bought into that vision. And beneath the North Atlantic, Titan was now on its way down. "9:20 a.m. Titan is descending below the launch platform, deeper into the ocean. Above, the Polar Prince maintains position. Inside the submersible, 5 people sit in near darkness, lit only by instrument panels and a single viewport. For the first hour and a half, communication follows a steady rhythm. Every 15 minutes, a short text update. Every 5 to 10 seconds, an automatic acoustic ping, confirming position and depth. 9:19 a.m. Titan sends its first text message to the surface from 235 meters. The support vessel acknowledges, and the descent continues as expected. 9:23 a.m. A brief flicker of concern as Titan disappears from the acoustic telemetry module. For a moment, there is uncertainty. 2 minutes later, the link stabilizes. Pings resume on the display. Data returns to normal. On the surface, the issue is logged as resolved. 9:30 a.m. At 630 meters, the surface team tracks Titan's rate of travel at 33 meters per minute and continues to monitor its speed and depth as it moves steadily downward. 9:40 a.m. Just over 20 minutes into the descent, the surface team requests updated figures on payload, weight, and depth. Numbers are exchanged. For a moment, the same figure is repeated back. A minor mix-up, common in low-bandwidth communication, and is clarified immediately. Titan's new depth of 1,085 meters is acknowledged. 9:52 a.m. The sub passes 1,500 meters. No anomalies reported. The pressure outside the hull is now over 2,250 pounds per square inch, 150 times that at sea level. 10:05 a.m. Approaching 2,000 meters. The surface team checks whether the sub can still see the support vessel on its navigation display. A routine cross-check. No response. The question is sent again. And again. The acoustic pings continue every few seconds. A total of 11 messages are sent to Titan, requesting a status update. But the text channel remains quiet. "10:09 a.m. The Polar Prince receives a brief reply indicating a communications check. The exchange resumes with a request for better communications from Titan. Paul Henry now mans the communications between the two vessels. 10:14 a.m. At a depth of 2,274 meters, a message arrives from Titan. All good here. Outside the hull, pressure now exceeds 3,300 pounds per square inch. Inside, there is no indication of distress. The descent continues. 10:24 a.m. More than an hour into the descent, the conversation shifts from systems and speed to position. The sub reports its orientation relative to the target area, the bow of the Titanic. Signal strength from the ship's side remains stable. At almost 3,000 meters, the seabed is within reach, closing in on the final approach. 10:47 a.m. Titan is now approximately 3,341 meters below the surface, just over 450 meters from the wreck. A final text message is sent. Dropped 2 weights, a standard procedure adjusting buoyancy from negative to neutral as it approaches the seabed. Seconds later, the final acoustic ping is received. Then, on board the Polar Prince, crew monitoring the communications channel hear a loud bang.
Yeah, we should be about 500 meters, 30. What was that bang?
It is abrupt, unmistakable, but there is no immediate confirmation of what it is. The text message arrives moments after the sound. No distress signal follows. No automated alert. The acoustic pings stop. "10:53 a.m. Contact is lost. On board the Polar Prince, the first response is procedural. Resend the message, check the console, verify the acoustic channel. The pings are gone. But at depths like these, equipment can fail and signals can distort. So, they wait. 11 a.m. After repeated attempts to re-establish contact, there is no response, no new data. The submersible should be nearing the seabed. There is still no reason yet to assume catastrophe. 11:30 a.m. The expected arrival time at the wreck passes. Nothing. The surface team continues calling down. Silence. In the early afternoon, the concern begins to harden. If Titan had released ballast and surfaced early, it should be visible. There is no sign of it, no emergency beacon, no communication. By late afternoon, the United States Coast Guard is notified. The dive is officially overdue. A clock begins to dominate every calculation. 96 hours of breathable air supply. 4 days, if the vessel is intact. In the evening, search aircraft are mobilized. Ships reroute toward the last known coordinates. The search area covers more than 20,000 square kilometers of open ocean. They are looking for something smaller than a delivery van. Possibly on the surface, possibly 3,800 meters below. June 19th.
Yesterday afternoon, long. We were notified by the operator of the submersible vessel that it was overdue, and it had 5 persons on board the submersible. So we're working very closely at this point to make sure that we're doing everything that we can do to locate the submersible and rescue those on board. It is a remote area, and it is a challenge to conduct a search in that remote area, but we are deploying all available assets to make sure that we can locate the craft and rescue the people on board.
International resources join the search. Aircraft scan the surface for any sign of debris. Sonobuoys are dropped into the water to detect sound from below. Underwater noises, described as intermittent banging, are reported during the search. Each sound is analyzed and triangulated. Hope surges. Could it be them? Experts caution restraint. Sound travels unpredictably underwater. The origin is unclear. Still, the search remains focused on rescue. June 20th.
Yesterday, the Canadian P3 detected underwater noises in the search area. As a result, ROV operations were relocated in an attempt to explore the origin of the noises. Although the ROV searches have yielded negative results, they continue.
The oxygen calculations dominate headlines. Less than 48 hours of air remaining, if the hull is intact. More vessels arrive. Remotely operated vehicles are transported across the Atlantic to begin the underwater search. As of 10:45 a.m., the U.S. Coast Guard has searched 10,000 square miles. Time is now measured in hours. Every delay matters. Weather conditions shift. Waves build. The search area widens. On the surface, nothing. Below, still nothing confirmed. June 21st.
The location of the search, 900 miles east of Cape Cod and 400 miles southeast of St. John's, makes it exceptionally difficult to mobilize large amounts of equipment quickly. In spite of those challenges, we've been able to provide continuous air and surface search assets, as well as additional ROV capability to search below the surface.
By mid-afternoon, the scale of the operation has expanded. As of 3 o'clock, 5 air and water vehicles are actively searching the area. Aircraft scanning the surface. Vessels coordinating sonar sweeps across the seabed.
Surface search is now approximately 2 times the size of Connecticut, and the subsurface search is up to 2.5 miles deep, exponentially expanding the size of the search area. We also have to factor in the ever-changing weather conditions, currents, and sea states that expand the search area every hour. There's an enormous complexity associated with this case due to the location being so offshore and the coordination between multiple agencies and nations.
Another 5 assets are expected to arrive within the next 24 to 48 hours. Patterns are recalculated. Fuel, weather, and daylight windows dictate movement. With more and more limited oxygen supply remaining, resources are being mobilized as quickly as possible. Another chance, however small, to locate the sub before time runs out.
There are 2 ROVs actively searching, and several more are en route and will arrive by tomorrow morning. When you're in the middle of a search and rescue case, you always have hope. That's why we're doing what we do. The good news is, what I can tell you is we're searching in the area where the noises were detected. And we we hope that when we're able to get additional ROVs, which will be there in the morning, the intent will be to continue to search in those areas where the noises were detected, and if they're continuing to be detected, and then put additional ROVs down in the last known position where the search was originally taking place.
June 22nd. A deep-sea ROV finally reaches the ocean floor near the Titanic wreck site. Cameras cut through the darkness. Silt drifts in the beam of artificial light. The seabed appears. Then, metal. Not part of the Titanic. Angular, modern, debris. The ROV continues scanning. More fragments appear. Carbon fiber, titanium. Pieces consistent with the submersible. The 96-hour clock ends early. The search changes in that moment. It is no longer a question of rescue. The wreckage indicates a catastrophic implosion. Instantaneous, no survival window.
This morning, an ROV, or remote-operated vehicle, from the vessel Horizon Arctic discovered the tail cone of the Titan submersible approximately 1,600 feet from the bow of the Titanic on the seafloor. The ROV subsequently found additional debris. In consultation with experts from within the Unified Command, the debris is consistent with the catastrophic loss of the pressure chamber. Upon this determination, we immediately notified the families. On behalf of the United States Coast Guard and the entire Unified Command, I offer my deepest condolences to the families.
The search shifts to recovery and to explanation, because the discovery answers one question: what happened? But it leaves others unresolved. How did it happen? Why did it happen? And could it have been prevented? In the days following the discovery of debris, the focus turns from rescue to responsibility. The question is no longer whether Titan imploded. The question is why. At nearly 3,800 meters below the surface, the external pressure exceeds 5,500 pounds per square inch. That is more than 380 times the pressure at sea level. Traditional deep-sea submersibles are built with thick, spherical hulls made entirely of titanium or steel, materials that behave predictably under compression. Titan was different. Its central pressure vessel was constructed primarily from carbon fiber, a material more commonly used in aerospace and high-performance engineering. Carbon fiber is extremely strong under tension, but deep-sea environments apply compression, and compression behaves differently. Unlike metal, which tends to deform before failing, carbon fiber can fail suddenly, catastrophically. Experts had raised concerns years earlier about the long-term behavior of carbon fiber under repeated cycles of extreme pressure.
You know, the community, our community of deep ocean engineers spoke out against it quite loudly, and the warnings were unheeded.
Each dive to the Titanic meant descending into crushing force, then returning to surface pressure. Over time, that cycling can introduce microscopic weaknesses, delamination, internal damage invisible to the naked eye. The hull of Titan had completed multiple deep dives. Each one added stress. Unlike most commercial submersibles operating at extreme depths, Titan was not classed by a major maritime certification body. Classification societies exist to independently verify that vessels meet established engineering and safety standards. OceanGate chose not to pursue full certification. Instead, the company described its approach as innovative, arguing that traditional standards could limit progress. In 2018, a group of industry experts reportedly signed a letter expressing concern about the vessel's development and testing processes. They warned that experimental design choices could lead to catastrophic outcomes. OceanGate disputed those concerns. Publicly, the company maintained confidence in its safety protocols. There had been warning signs. During earlier expeditions, communication issues were documented. In one instance, the sub reported lost contact with its support vessel for several hours. On another dive, the sub experienced problems with its thrusters, resulting in difficulty navigating near the wreck. Former employees later described internal disagreements over safety procedures and testing. One former director of marine operations raised concerns about the thickness of the carbon fiber hull. He was subsequently dismissed from the company. OceanGate maintained that its engineering decisions were sound and that safety remained a priority. But the pattern suggests friction between caution and ambition. OceanGate equipped Titan with an acoustic monitoring system designed to detect early signs of hull stress.
I don't think we were like the specifics of exactly what it's doing and how it works wasn't covered, but the concept that there was a system that was listening that would hear early warning signs of carbon fiber getting stressed that would alert the pilot and give you a chance to turn around and go back before it got to a point where it was actually dangerous. That was how it was described. And I know that Stockton had a lot of faith in that system. I think that he believed that was all that was needed in order to be confident that the hull was solid.
But at extreme depths, failure can occur faster than human reaction time. An implosion at 3,300 meters happens in milliseconds. There is no opportunity to ascend, no time to release ballast, no moment for emergency procedure. The event would have been instantaneous. At the center of the company was its founder, Stockton Rush. Rush described himself as an innovator. He frequently spoke about breaking industry barriers and challenging what he saw as overly cautious regulation.
Everyone's got different opinions on how subs should be designed, how dives should be conducted, how expeditions should be conducted. That being said, developing innovations in any new technology, including submersibles, means that sometimes you have to go outside of the bounds of the regulatory scheme.
In interviews, he argued that progress requires risk, that safety standards can sometimes stifle advancement. But in deep-sea exploration, risk behaves differently. The ocean does not allow partial failure. It does not allow second attempts. It does not negotiate. While official investigations continue to analyze debris, the prevailing assessment is structural failure of the pressure hull, most likely triggered by material fatigue or a flaw within the carbon fiber cylinder. When failure occurred, the surrounding pressure collapsed the vessel inward at the speed of sound in water. The 5 occupants would not have been aware. The event would have been over before the brain could register it. The deeper question is harder. Was this unforeseeable, or was it avoidable?
I know that there's a lot of questions about why, how, when this happened, and the members of the Unified Command, have those questions too, as professionals and experts that work in this environment.
They clearly need to establish the cause of the incident, and after that, they then need to establish if there's any responsibility from the people involved, which then may lead to claims of negligence, perhaps even criminal negligence.
They were doing some amazing gymnastics to circumvent regulations and detection by the jurisdictions.
I always hoped that what happened wouldn't happen, but in the back of my mind, I just knew if they just kept carrying on the way they were going, and with that deficient equipment, then there would be an incident.
Primary operator, your CEO, was also filling the role of safety officer, lead engineer at the end. And it's just too many, it's a consolidation of power that leads to no checks and balances.
There's a risk in this, and the question here is that, do we expose civilians to this type of risk when we do not have a firm set of standards on design and safety for these types of vessels?
I would submit that there's a terrible irony here. Here we have at the wreck of Titanic, we now have another wreck that is based on, unfortunately, the same principles of not heeding warnings.
5 people descended toward the Titanic, believing they were participating in exploration. They trusted the vessel. They trusted the engineering. They trusted the system that approved it.
He had the enthusiastic, outlook of a young child. Really, he was so excited about this opportunity, and he mentioned it with the biggest smile possible on his face.
He said that he was very excited about this submarine trip, a trip that he hoped would be quality bonding time with his father.
That's the difference. This also happens to be my field. When it's involving with people that you know personally, it's the impact is bigger.
I told him in no uncertain terms that he should not get in the submersible. And I'll never forget, he told me he thought that it was safe enough. And I said, Hamish, I'm not sure what else I can say after that. I wouldn't go if I were you. And he really, really wanted to see the Titanic.
The ocean did not fail them. Physics did not fail them. The pressure at depth was exactly what it had always been. The tragedy lies not in the sea, but in the decisions made above it. In the end, the story of Titan mirrors the story of the ship it sought to visit. Ambition, innovation, confidence in technology, and the cost when that confidence goes too far.